Ladies and gentlemen, this is the absolute best thing that you've heard all day. Trump sends cease and desist to GOP over using him for fundraising. This is an article in the Washington Examiner today. Former President Donald Trump declared himself as the leader of the Republican Party in February, but that doesn't mean he wants the party to raise money from his name. Well, he is the leader of the Republican Party, and nobody comes close. He still has close to around a 90% approval rating. About 2/3 of Republican voters would actually leave the GOP if he started his own organization or political entity. And let's continue. The former president sent a cease and desist letter to the Republican National Committee, the National Republican Congressional Committee, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee, demanding that they stop using his name and likeness on fundraising emails and merchandise. Let's see how much money they get using the likeness of Mitt Romney or Ben Sasse. That, when I see I'm a former lefty. I voted for Trump because I want to remove Americans from never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. President Trump removed Americans from a region of the world that it took 1 month for President Biden to revert back to his foreign policy histories. I have to speak in roundabout terms, as always, to keep the channel and in good standing. But what happened a month into his presidency? Well, he wanted to send a message, President Biden, because Americans in that region were in harm's way. Because a country that he wants to negotiate with was funding groups that put Americans in harm's way. Okay, why are we there? President Trump has stated repeatedly, and he worked to remove Americans to end the longest-running conflict that we've had. And he was on his way to doing even greater things in terms of foreign policy. I mean, the Abraham Accords and being the first president to step foot in North Korea. That's something that you couldn't expect. That's the antithesis of what a despot or totalitarian or authoritarian would do. In addition to prison reform legislation, you have to be ignorant of history. You have to have such a poor grasp of history to think that Trump is a totalitarian because of his Twitter account. Okay? These despots throughout history they weren't nefarious individuals because of their words. It was because of their actions. If you judge Trump based on his actions, he's the antithesis, the opposite of a despot. By his actions, and even by his words. I mean, you can go ahead. Just recently, President Biden has said things that would not be allowed in this day and age. But of course, it's a Democrat. But hit subscribe to this channel right now. I'm going to give you the perspective of a voter of President Trump who used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I was the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. I wanted an end to never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. I wanted an end to all of that. And I thought, it was Bernie Sanders and Clinton. Clinton was advised, she wanted a no-fly zone, above Damascus. Does that make any sense at all? With Russian jets flying above. Does that make any sense? Again, we can go on forever. The foreign policy, our foreign policy as a country has been horrendous since Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld and President Obama, with a failed NATO intervention that obliterated the country. So, but they get away with everything because media sweeps everything under the rug, does not investigate, there's no uproar, there's no outrage whenever it's a Democrat or an establishment Republican. So, and you shouldn't have set up and framed President Trump with an absurd hoax that Facebook ads he was working with Putin. Gee, what are the chances that Peter Strzok and Clapper and Brennan and Comey just simply didn't want Trump? Gee, you think that, you would have to convince yourself that these political operatives were completely apolitical. They just happened to go on MSNBC and CNN and get the most favorable coverage from the New York Times and the Washington Post. By the way, and hit subscribe to this channel. I might not do a live stream today. I'm not sure. but stay tuned. The cease and desist, ladies and gentlemen, when you have the United States government utilize a dossier that's purchased by your direct political rival, okay, and this dossier is filtered through the United States government by Republicans. When Paul Ryan and Richard Burr and McCain, everybody turns against you, and they're investigating you. When you have the Speaker of the House allowing an investigation, Jeff Sessions, President Trump, think of this. I don't think people understand this, and this is exactly why he issued the cease and desist. Republicans have no right generating any fundraising or money from a person they never truly adopted, who only helped them. And, okay, look, last couple of months or last 5 months, there were things that President Trump shouldn't have done. There were missteps. He definitely shouldn't have utilized Twitter in the manner that he did the past 2 years. He shouldn't have insulted LeBron James. He shouldn't have insulted NFL athletes. He shouldn't have insulted people on Twitter, or he shouldn't have been as belligerent. It did him no good politically. It didn't do the country any good. But his accomplishments, his accomplishments were overshadowed by his Twitter account. He allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. I would love for somebody to explain how you could be a racist, horrible person, even if you do that. Well, you could still be a bad person. Yeah, you could still be, but he signed prison reform legislation as well. He focused on economic opportunity zones. What on earth did Democrats ever do? Not just for not just for the most important voting base within the Democratic Party, but what did Democrats ever do for any of their constituents? President Trump got a greater percentage of non-white voters than any Republican in 60 years, and now Republicans want to use his likeness after they set him up and framed him, and after 7 voted to convict him? When even the mayor of D.C. and the attorney general of D.C. didn't level charges at him? Why not? They make these categorical claims. Like, if you make a claim, hey, you know what? I think Biden's son enriched himself from the family name. How dare you? There's no evidence of that. We don't even know if those emails pointing to exactly that claim are legitimate. But then if you say, it's Trump's fault in January, 100%, okay, you made a categorical claim without a shadow of a doubt. It's a certainty. Great. Well, then why haven't the Attorney General of D.C. and the Mayor of D.C. or anyone in a state or federal court gone after Trump? You could say, well, there's lawsuits associated with it, but no. There are specific legal statutes. There are specific legal statutes pertaining to what they're accusing Trump of doing. None of those statutes have been leveled against Trump. Nobody has stated that he's broken those specific statutes. Nobody has stated that he committed that specific crime. Because it's all public relations with Trump. They couldn't find him on Trump Russia because it was fabricated by intel operatives who literally texted each other, we'll stop him. They couldn't get him on the first impeachment was so absurd that he tried to strong-arm the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky. President Zelensky himself stated there was no leverage. President Poroshenko, his predecessor, stated there was no leverage against him also. So then what did Democrats say? No, we don't believe you. He tried to strong arm. There was no direct evidence. Then you had people saying, well, yeah, we think he did that. Do you have any direct evidence? No. But there were never disclaimers on Twitter. No, there's only disclaimers and caution statements and disputed claim statements whenever it's an allegation or accusation against a Democrat without direct evidence. But suspicion, a great deal of suspicion. It's 74 million Americans who are very suspicious of Biden and Clinton and all of even Romney. But that's also why the Republican Party can't, I shouldn't say necessarily Romney, but establishment Republicans or rhinos or never Trumpers. They're not exactly they're the reason President Trump won. Trump offers a populist message, just like Bernie Sanders. There's a direct line between Bernie Sanders and Trump. The Bernie voters are mortified whenever you hear this now. That's always been the line that Democrats have. But you know what? That's a broken clock is right twice a day. So the Democrats are actually right about that. There's a direct line between Bernie Sanders and Trump because populist policies on the left, there's certain populist policies, especially in terms of foreign policy. Okay? Foreign policy. And it's interesting too because I don't even want to get into it. It's like I'm against counterinsurgency conflicts. Okay? I know that Trump is not a pacifist, but he's not a person who's going to engage in changing a regime or intervening in a country or removing a despot and then sending Americans to patrol cities. That's not what we should do. That's not what any country should do. And, you know, you look at the failures of President Obama's administration and Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld. You can't accuse Trump of anything close to that type of failure. So you had 92% negative media coverage. You had Republicans who never really stood behind Trump. You had Jeff Sessions and Paul Ryan and Richard Burr and the top Republicans investigating a Republican president and allowing Democrats to impeach a Republican president, offering no pushback, offering pretty much no rebuttal. And throughout this pandemic, what did Republicans offer as an alternative? Nothing. They were pretty much like pummeled into submission by media and Democrats. I mean, not just in terms of the pandemic. What were they offering in terms of a message when it came to the impeachments? When it came to really any prevailing media narrative that Trump worked with Russia? They were part of it. I mean, look, President Trump made missteps that he has to correct. He made missteps that he has to correct, but at the same time, he was able to do something pretty profound. We had record low unemployment throughout most of his tenure. That's a fact. Go look at the unemployment rates throughout most of President Trump's tenure. All throughout 2018, all throughout 2019. Okay? In the beginning of 2020, and I think towards the end of 2017 as well. And they said, oh, it was President Obama's administration, oh, you know, and they never acknowledged that life was good. Like, the obsession they had with Trump was a meltdown. They lost miserably. And they never, like with Trump, they never acknowledged that, okay, he's a legitimate president. They said he was illegitimate. They sowed division. They sowed discord. They sowed distrust. They questioned the integrity. Oh, where have you heard these things? You're talking about the biggest hypocrites on the planet. They don't run by a moral code or ethical standard or whatever. They anything that suits them for that moment. Kavanaugh, different story from Biden. 2016, different story from last year. It's not like working with Russia. Well, you got a Steele dossier with help from Russian intelligence official. There are no sacred cows for Democrats because they just create a new sacred cow, or they just create a new narrative whenever it suits them. Well, you need evidence now. Oh, you didn't need evidence with Kavanaugh. Now you need evidence. And look at the way they treated Tara Reid, and look at the way they treated the situation with Kavanaugh. Look at the difference in media coverage. Police report was filed against our wonderful President Biden. Who talks about that? There was no police report filed against the Supreme Court Justice or Trump. There were no police reports filed. There was a police report. And you know what the New York Times said? If you file that report, if it's not true, you could actually go to prison. This is the duplicity. With Madison Caulfield, one of the publications that published the Steele dossier found 36 people to corroborate not anything that was based on a formal complaint or a report with the police. But 36 people they found, you better believe they were going to go after. Oh my God, 36 people. When it was Andrew Cuomo, now you're starting to see people come out and say, hey, wait a second, this person is horrendous. He treats people in a really bizarre manner. Misconduct. How many people did any publication on the left interview to bolster those claims, to back up the claims? How about none? I don't know about 36 people. You could multiply that by 3 now, so well over 100. So it's like there's a different standard. So Republicans are a part of this. Why on earth should they? They're going to raise money from a man that they threw under the bus simply because of his personality? Because Cheney and Kinzinger voted alongside Trump over 90% of the time. So did Mitch McConnell. So what are they upset with Trump about? Well, his personality. If he toned it down just a little. If he tones it down just a little bit. That's why, like when I said Nikki Haley would be a great vice president, people said, no, she's not trustworthy. Everyone railroaded Trump. Who stood by him, really? You could say Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, but then when, that tragedy took place, which wasn't directly Trump's fault, although there shouldn't even have been protests that day, they were quiet. They should have explained, hey, I stood by Trump for these reasons, but they didn't. Look, he needs to build alliances. I mean, he's a bulldozer and a sledgehammer, and that's good but that's not always good. He needs to build some kind of alliances so he doesn't have to deal with this mess in 4 years. And, you're going to have Trump Republicans take over the House of Representatives. Devin Nunes, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Doug Collins, Ron DeSantis. These types of people are going to take over. And then you'll have a more unified Republican Party around President Trump with a populist message. But he still needs to build alliances because there will be the never-Trumpers. And I'm not saying you kowtow to anybody, but it would be nice to have an actual opposition political party. Give me your thoughts below. Republicans do not deserve to raise any money from Trump. Trump did the right thing. And it's hilarious, too, because now the Republicans have to contend with what they've done. These are the repercussions for going after and investigating a Republican president based on a dossier that Democrats created. Give me your thoughts below.